Hi, this story is made by a human just for fun. It's not real. All the characters and events are made up. Thanks for watching. The stars burned cold outside the Vagrant's viewport, a scattering of white-hot pinpricks against the infinite black. Barry Reed leaned back in the pilot's chair, the faint hum of the ship's engines vibrating through his bones. He didn't like working with aliens, too many sharp edges, too many hidden agendas, but starvation was a worse employer. The job was simple enough. Deliver a data chip to Zethar, a Velm noble with a reputation for cruelty and credits to burn. Barry didn't ask questions. Questions got you killed. He just flew, fought, and collected. The landing bay of Zethar estate was a sterile expanse of polished obsidian, flanked by a dozen armed guards in matte black exosuits. Their visors glinted under the artificial light, tracking Barry's every step as he descended the Vagrant's ramp. He carried the data chip in his left hand, a small, unassuming thing that held the encrypted routes of a rival's spice trade through Sector 12. Barry's job had been to intercept, sabotage, and deliver proof. He'd done it clean. No witnesses. No mess. Zethar stood at the far end of the bay, his tall, angular frame draped in a robe of liquid silver that shimmered like a living thing. His eyes, too large for a human face, glowed faintly purple, and his thin lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're late," he said, his voice a low hiss that carried across the room. Barry didn't flinch. He tossed the data chip onto the polished table between them. It skidded to a stop with a faint clink. "Job's done. Your rivals won't be moving spice through Sector 12 anymore." Zethar's eyes flicked to the chip, then back to Barry. He snapped his fingers, and a servant, a small, nervous Velm, with trembling hands, scurried forward, placing a large iron key in Barry's palm. It was heavy, cold, and etched with symbols Barry didn't recognize. He stared at it, his jaw tightening. "What the hell is this?" Zethar's smile widened, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Your payment. I didn't ask for it." "Key," Barry growled, his voice low, but edged with steel. "I asked for credits. You want payment? Mercenary?" Zethar's lips curled into a sneer. "Take her instead. My sister. She's useless to me." Barry's grip on the key tightened. The job was 10,000 Imperial credits. Not a broken woman in a locked room. Zethar leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Call it a bonus, then. You'll find her in the north wing, top floor, still breathing." Barry's instincts screamed at him to walk away, to toss the key back in Zethar's face and burn out of the system. But curiosity was a dangerous thing, and it had always been his weakness. He pocketed the key and turned toward the corridor, ignoring the weight of the guards' gazes on his back. The north wing was a labyrinth of cold stone and flickering lights, a stark contrast to the opulence of the landing bay. The air grew heavier as Barry climbed the spiral staircase to the top floor, the iron key a dead weight in his hand. He found the door marked, reinforced, and sealed with a lock that looked older than the estate itself. The key fit perfectly, turning with a heavy click that echoed in the silence. The room beyond was sparse, lit by a single overhead panel that cast harsh shadows. In the center, seated in a sleek, motorized chair, was a woman. Her skin was a faint violet, typical of the Velm, but her eyes were sharp, glinting like polished steel. Her hair, once probably long and lustrous, was cropped short, and her body was thin, almost fragile. But there was a fire in her gaze that made Barry pause at the threshold. "Krola," she said, her voice low and steady. "You're late. I expected my brother to send a monster. Instead, I get you." Barry stayed at the door, one hand resting on the frame. "I'm not here for this. I came for payment, and you got me instead," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Congratulations. Now you're stuck." He took a step inside, his boots echoing on the stone floor. She was still unnervingly so, her hands resting lightly on the arms of her chair. You can walk? He asked, his voice softer than he intended. She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. If I could, I'd have ripped Zether's throat out by now. So, no, Barry said, circling the room slowly. There were no machines keeping her alive, no visible life support, just the chair and her. Why would he give you to me? Because I used to be his problem, she said, her voice hardening. Now I'm yours. He stopped, meeting her gaze. And you're okay with this? What choice do I have? Her eyes didn't waver. You're just another gun in a long line of men who think they can own me. But don't make the mistake of thinking I'm weak. Barry raised an eyebrow. You can't move. And yet I still have teeth, she said, her lips curling into a smirk. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. I didn't ask for you. Good, she said, her voice sharp. That stops you. Barry's jaw tightened. What did they do to you? Ask your new employer, she replied, her tone bitter. He paid a lot to have me redesigned. Barry folded his arms. I didn't come here to save you. Then kill me and be done with it, she said, her voice steady but her eyes blazing. He didn't move. Thought so, she said, her smirk returning. Your kind always wants to be the good guy, even when you're hired to be the villain. Barry walked to the edge of her chair, his fingers brushing the restraints. They were sleek, almost invisible, but they held her like iron. He unclasped one, then the other, the mechanisms releasing with a soft hiss. You're going to regret this, she whispered. Maybe, he said, meeting her gaze. But if I'm going down, I'd rather it be interesting. He slid his arms under her, lifting her from the chair. She was lighter than he expected, but her body was tense, coiled like a spring. You don't know what you've done, Barry, she said, her voice low. Yeah, he said, carrying her toward the door. Neither do you. The corridors of Zether's estate were a maze of polished stone and hidden cameras, but Barry moved. With purpose, Crowless weighed a constant reminder of the choice he'd just made. The guards didn't stop him Stether's orders, no doubt, but their eyes followed, cold and unblinking. The vagrant's ramp hissed open as he approached, the cargo bay swallowing them in shadow. He carried her to his quarters, a small, utilitarian space with a cot, a console, and a few scattered tools. He set her on the bed, stepping back quickly. She laughed, a low, throaty sound. So, this is where you keep the rest of your trophies. Barry moved to the other side of the room, leaning against the wall. I should have left you behind. But you didn't, she said, propping herself up on her elbows with visible effort. And now you're stuck wondering if you're some kind of hero for it. I'm not a hero, Barry said flatly. Heroes don't smuggle contraband. For alien nobles? No, she replied, her voice softening. But they also don't carry broken women out of prisons they didn't build. That silenced him. Crolla shifted, her eyes locking onto his. Tell me something, Barry. What do you think you're going to do with me now? He shrugged, his expression unreadable. Haven't figured it out. You should sell me, she said, her voice sharp. I'm dead weight. You're breathing, Barry said, his tone matter-of-fact. That's more than I can say for half the people I've worked with. Crolla looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. He expected another barb, another biting quip, but instead, she said, he crippled me. Barry froze. Zether? She nodded, her gaze distant. 4 years ago, I was the heir. I ran his operations, built his routes, his contacts. I was the heir, he breathed. But he couldn't stand that, so one day, my shuttle malfunctions, implodes, mid-flight. I wake up in recovery, legs useless. Spine partially fused, body drugged. He told me I was lucky to be alive. Then he started cutting my access, my funds, my status, until I was just a name. Barry took a step forward. And now he gives you away like a party favor. Because, to him, I'm already dead. she said, her eyes gleaming. But you, Barry, you walked out with me. That means something. You think this is all some test? He asked, his voice low. She didn't blink. I think it's a beginning. There was a pause. Barry's stomach growled, a low rumble. That broke the tension. You hungry? He asked. She blinked, surprised, then smirked. What? No shackles? No cage? You disappoint me. Barry walked toward the exit. Food's in the galley. If you're as smart as you think, you'll figure out the chair controls. They respond to voice prompts. How thoughtful, she said, her tone dry. He stopped at the door, looking back. For what it's worth, he said, I don't. Think you're dead? Wait, she called, but he was already gone. Half an hour later, Crolla found the galley. The chair moved smoothly under her command, responding to her voice with a quiet hum. Barry was already there, chewing through a ration bar, his eyes fixed on a small holoscreen displaying nav charts. She rolled to the opposite end of the table and grabbed a pack, tearing it open with steady hands. What's our heading? She asked, her voice casual, but probing. Neutral zone, just past the Drayon outpost, Barry said, not looking up. Too close, she said, her tone sharp. Zethar has ships watching that corridor. I'm not flying blind, Barry replied, finally meeting her gaze. I've got jammers and a cloaker. We'll slip through. And what happens when you're boarded? Crolla leaned forward. You think you can pass me off as a passenger? Barry's eyes narrowed. Then tell me what you want. I want my legs back, she said, her voice low and fierce. I want my name back, and I want to burn his empire to ash. You want? To help with that? Barry stared at her, his expression unreadable. Depends on what you're offering. Crolla leaned in, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Zethar's hiding something, a vault, not money, information, coordinates, lists, trafficking manifests, bribes, surveillance data. You get me to a lab, and I'll give you everything. Barry's jaw tightened. What kind of lab? Station, Oryx, she said. Biomechanics and neural rebuilders. They can fix me, and then we burn them together. You get one shot, Barry said, his voice low. That's all I need. Hours later, Barry lay in his cot, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come, not with the weight of Crolla's words pressing against his chest. The ship's hum was a constant companion, but tonight it felt like a warning. He didn't trust her not fully, but something about her fire, her defiance, had hooked him. She wasn't just a burden or a bargaining chip. She was dangerous, and that intrigued him more than he wanted to admit. You didn't sleep, Crolla said, her voice cutting through the silence as she rolled into the cockpit. Because of me. Barry didn't answer, just sat up, rubbing his eyes. You always this charming before breakfast. Only when I'm preparing to commit. A crime, she said, her chair whispering across the steel floor. She stopped in front of the navigation console and tapped in a few commands. I scanned your heading. You're not taking us to Oryx. I'm not, Barry admitted. Not directly. Why? Because I don't trust you, he said, bluntly. I carried you out because your brother's a bastard, not because I owe you. Crolla's gaze sharpened, and here I thought we were bonding. Barry stood, crossing the room to pull up a secondary nav screen. He brought up the specs for Waypoint Zeta, a backwater relay station on the edge of the neutral zone. We stop here first. Get forged IDs. Recalibrate the vagrant signal profile. You're on every registry Zethar has access to. If we jump straight to Oryx, he'll know. Crolla stared at the screen. Zetas, a junkyard. It's corrupt, but it's quiet, and it owes me a favor, Barry said, his voice steady. The station boss is a creep, but he won't try anything stupid. And if he does? Crolla asked, her fingers tapping the armrest of her chair. Barry smirked. Then he loses a few teeth. Waypoint Zeta was less a space station and more a glorified scrap heap bolted to a trade route. Its corridors were a tangle of exposed wires and rusted panels, the air thick with the smell of oil and recycled oxygen. Barry walked ahead, one hand near his holster, Krola's chair humming softly. Behind him, the station's inhabitants, mercenaries, smugglers, and drifters cast curious glances, but most avoided eye contact. "They keep looking at me," Krola said, her voice low. "Because they don't know what you are," Barry replied, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Neither do you." She shot him a sidelong glance, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "That's the first honest thing you've said." They reached the back corner of the station's exchange center, a dimly lit booth, manned by a squat, greasy-haired human named Tove. His eyes flicked over Krola, lingering too long, before settling on Barry. "Well," Tove said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon. Reed, who's the passenger?" "I need clean IDs for both of us," Barry said, cutting through the pleasantries. "No scans, no delays." Tove's smile widened. "That'll cost you." Barry dropped a small drive on the counter. 1,000 credits, plus a favor from the last job I pulled for you. Tove's eyes narrowed, but he took the drive, plugging it into a battered console. The exchange was made in under an hour, 2 fresh IDs, untraceable, with Krola's biometric signature scrubbed clean. When they returned to the Vagrant, Krola remained quiet until the airlock sealed behind them. "You trust people who talk like that?" she asked, her voice sharp. "I don't trust anyone," Barry said, checking the ship's systems. "I just know who I can use." Krola turned to face him, her eyes blazing. "Then use me." Barry froze. "Excuse me? You're planning?" "To burn Zethar," she said, her voice low and intense. "You can't do it alone. I have the names, the transactions, the black site coordinates, locked behind encryption you can't crack. But I can." "Why now?" Barry asked, his voice wary. "Because we're running out of time," she said, her voice dropping. "Zethar knows I'm gone. Once he confirms I'm with you, he'll send something worse than bounty hunters." Barry folded his arms. "What kind of something?" "A kill team," she said, locking eyes with him. "And he'll send them because I know things that could end him." Barry stepped closer. "Then why haven't you used them?" "Because I didn't have a ship, or a crew, or a body that worked," she said, her voice raw. "Now I have 2 of those." "You think I'm your crew?" Barry asked, his tone skeptical. "I think you're the first idiot who didn't walk away," she said, a faint smile playing on her lips. Barry nodded once. "All right, we do it your way. But I've got one condition." "Let me guess," Krola said. "Don't lie to me." "Too late for that," he muttered. "My condition is simple. When this ends, we walk away clean. No galactic revolution, no moral crusade, just closure." Krola tilted her head, her eyes searching his. "Deal," she said. "But first, I'm going to show you something." Back in the Vagrant's med bay, Krola interfaced with the nav console, her fingers moving with practiced ease, despite her limited mobility. A star map projected into the air above them. A dizzying array of red dots marking secret shipping lanes, black site labs, and encrypted cargo route Zethar's entire underworld empire mapped out like a spider web. Barry whistled low. "How the hell did you get all this?" "I built half of it," Krola said, her voice tinged with bitterness, "before I lost the right to walk." Barry looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Oryx is the key," she continued. "They have the techneural regen protocols, implants. But there's something else." "What?" "Zethar has a fails embedded in my spinal mod," she said, her voice darkening. "A kill command. If I try to tamper with it, it'll fry my nervous system." "Jesus," Barry muttered. "Can you disable it?" "Not from here," she said. "But if I can get into the mainframe on Oryx, I can sever the link, wipe it, and then I take back everything." Barry nodded slowly. Then let's fly. As he moved to the cockpit, Crowla's voice stopped him. Barry, he turned. Why did you really take me? She asked, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. He thought for a moment, then said, because I don't like the idea of anyone being thrown away. She nodded, her expression unreadable. Good. Station Oryx was a gleaming silver eye. In the void, a sprawling hub of biomechanical research and black market tech. Barry piloted the Vagrant through the first 2 checkpoints with ease, the forged IDs holding up under scrutiny. But at the third, the guard paused, his eyes narrowing. At the scanner's display, there's a data smear on this, he said, glancing at Crowla's cloaker. Most cloakers clean the biosig better. This one's fuzzy, unstable. Barry leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. We'll fix it at the tech bay. You done? The guard paused, then smiled thinly. Yeah, done. They were waved through. But Barry's gut churned. Something was wrong. The private clinic Crowla had specified was buried deep in Oryx's medtech wing, past sterile surgical suites and humming drones. They were greeted by a thin woman in white, her jet-black eyes unblinking, and her voice eerily flat. Princess Crowla Ree, the woman said, using a name Barry hadn't heard before. We were told you might return. Barry stiffened. Told? By who? We receive funding from many streams, the woman replied, her gaze flicking to Crowla. Some of them trickle back to your brother. Crowla's jaw tightened. Then he knows I'm here. He always knew you'd try, the woman said. And you'll help me anyway? Crowla asked. The woman smiled. We don't take sides, just coin. She gestured to a chamber beyond, where a floating surgical table waited, surrounded by neural interfacing units and machines Barry couldn't name. The spinal override must be deactivated before we attempt the interface, the woman said. That part is dangerous. Possibly. Letho Crowla's gaze didn't waver. Start. The process was brutal. Barry watched as Crowla was stripped of her outer layers. Electrodes attached along her spine, thin needle-like interfaces drilled into the back of her neck. The techs moved fast, muttering in a language Barry didn't understand. Then the override. Signal spiked. The system's display flashed. Foreign command detected. Reversal protocol engaged. Crowla screamed, her body arching against the restraints. Barry crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbing the lead technician by the collar. What the hell are you doing to her? She's rejecting it, the tech gasped. We can't stop it. Then kill the signal, Barry snarled. We can't, the tech said, his voice trembling. It's embedded too deep. Barry's eyes flicked to Crowla. Her limbs twitched, her fingers clawing at the air. Then, impossibly, she moved. Her legs swung down from the table, trembling but functional. She gritted her teeth, standing on her own for the first time in years. Let's finish this. They fought their way out of the clinic, Crowla moving with a fierce, unsteady grace. The guards were waiting in the hangar, their weapons raised. Get behind me, Barry said, his pistol already drawn. Crowla didn't listen. She stepped beside him, her own weapon steady in her hands. He took everything from me, she said, her voice low and deadly. Not anymore. She opened fire, her shots clean and precise. 2 guards dropped instantly. The third hesitated, and Barry finished him with a single blast. Silence fell, broken only by the hum of the Vagrant's engines in the distance. I felt it, Crowla whispered, her voice trembling with exhilaration. The recoil, the heat. I'm back. Barry stared at her, blood on her cheek, legs trembling, but shoulders straight. She wasn't beautiful anymore. She was glorious. Back aboard the Vagrant, Crowla stripped the last of the clinic's bandages from her body. Barry stood at the door, unsure whether to approach. You did it, he said softly. No, she replied, turning to face him. We did. She stepped forward, wobbled, then caught herself. You carried me when I was nothing. Now I walk, on my own, But I need you to know this changes nothing. Barry frowned. What do you mean? I'm still going to burn my brother's empire to the ground, she said, her voice fierce. And if you're in the way, I won't hesitate. Barry stepped closer, meeting her gaze. Then I guess I'll just have to walk beside you. She smiled, a fierce, wild thing, and closed the distance between them. Her lips met his, hard and unyielding, a kiss that was more challenge than affection. Barry didn't hold back. Their bodies pressed together, a tangle of heat and need, and for the first time, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The refinery hub was Zether's pride, a sprawling complex built into an asteroid, field orbiting a dying star. It was the backbone of his off-world transport network, a fortress of steel and fire. Krola stood at the Vagrant's viewport, her eyes fixed on the structure. This is the first thing Zether built without my input, she said, her voice low, which makes it his greatest weakness. They docked at a forgotten service hatch, its codes still active from Krola's days running the Empire. The corridors inside were a maze of rusted pipes and chemical waste, the air thick with the smell of oil and decay. Barry moved first, his rifle at the ready, Krola close behind. This was supposed to be a covert op, Barry muttered. Why does it feel like we're walking into a trap? Because we are, Krola said, her voice calm, but we're not the prey. They reached the inner access hall, where a man in command armor stood waiting. He turned, his features sharp and eerily familiar. Krola, he said, his voice smooth. My twin. Barry's hand hovered over his blaster. Tell me you didn't walk me into this. Vaughn's different, Krola said, her voice cold. He was exiled for disagreeing with Zether's methods. And you trust him? Barry asked. No, she replied, but I need him. Vaughn stepped forward, his eyes flicking to Barry. I didn't expect you to make it this far, and yet you bring a human. You think someone like him can finish what we couldn't? Someone like me? Barry said, stepping forward. A mercenary, a killer, a tool. Krola's voice cut through the tension. No, he's the one person who didn't see me as a burden. Vaughn studied her for a moment, then laughed. Ain't really broke you, didn't he? Barry stepped between them, his eyes cold. We're not here for a reunion. We're here to burn Zether's empire. Vaughn's grin faded. Then you'll need the full codes to override the refinery's AI, and those are locked in my head. Krola met his gaze. Then give them to me. Not unless you prove your loyalty, Vaughn said. Kill one of the captains, Tyon. He's loyal to Zether, in charge of the cargo manifests. Kill him, and I'll give you what you need. They reached the cell block where Tyon sat at a console, a plasma rifle resting nearby. Thought it was you, he said, his voice calm. Then you know why I'm here, Krola said, raising her weapon. Tyon smiled. Do you have the stomach for it? Krola hesitated, her finger on the trigger. Barry stepped beside her, his own gun raised. We can do this together. No, she said, her voice steady. I need to do this myself. She walked forward, her eyes locked on Tyon's. He stood, his expression unreadable. They stared at each other for a long moment, then Krola fired. One clean shot. Tyon fell, his body crumpling to the floor. Krola didn't move. Barry stepped beside her. You okay? That was my tutor when I was a girl, she whispered. He taught me to shoot. Barry said nothing. Krola turned, her eyes blazing. Vaughn better deliver, or I'm killing him next. Back at the command hall, Vaughn handed over the override codes without a word. We're even, Krola said. Hardly, Vaughn replied. Now go. Back aboard the Vagrant. Barry ran diagnostics, while Krola stood at the nav console, her hands steady. You didn't have to do that, Barry said. Yes, she said, her voice flat. I did. Barry touched her arm. You're not the woman Zether threw away. I don't know what I am, she said, her voice breaking. Then we'll figure it out together, Barry said, his voice soft. And when it's over, I'm not leaving. She leaned back against him, her body trembling. He was the last one, she whispered. Tyon, the last person who remembered who I was. Before. Barry rested a hand on her arm. Doesn't make it easier. It's not supposed to, she said, turning to him. I can walk now. I can shoot. I can kill. So what does that make me? Barry's hand slid to her waist. It makes you dangerous, he said. But you were dangerous before. And now? You're free. She surged forward, her lips crashing into his. Their kiss was a collision, raw and unyielding, her hands curling into his shirt, dragging him into the dim corridor. They stumbled against the wall, breath tangled, bodies pressed tight. Clothes hit the floor in pieces, armor discarded in a trail. In the quiet of the ship's living space, they collided again and again, Krola's fingers pressing into his back, her legs tightening around his hips. Barry gave back everything she demanded, their bodies moving in a rhythm that was both fight and surrender. 6 days later, the Vagrant dropped from warp behind the Kalen Syndicate's stronghold, a fortress carved into an asteroid belt orbiting. A red dwarf, Krola loaded 2 rifles, her movements precise, while Barry checked explosives. We do this quiet, Barry said. No alarms, in and out. You keep saying that, Krola muttered, a smirk playing on her lips. And then you keep kissing me during firefights, because you're irresistible when you're bleeding, Barry said, matching her smirk. Good, she said, because we're about to get bloody. The Kalen station was a labyrinth of tunnels and reinforced chambers, its air thick with the scent of metal and dust. Krola moved like she owned the place, her steps steady, despite the faint tremor in her legs. You said this was where Zethar bought his muscle, Barry murmured. No, Krola replied. This is where he bought his loyalty with people who lost everything else. They reached a reinforced blast door, and Krola paused, her fingers tracing the access pad. She should be inside, she said. And if she isn't, Barry asked. Then, I was wrong about more than just the syndicate, Krola said, her voice low. The door opened with a groan, revealing a private command room scattered with terminals and weapons crates. At the center stood a woman, her hand hovering near her weapon but not drawing. Krola, she said, her voice calm. You're supposed to be dead. Sarah, Krola replied. And last I heard, you were being given away like a broken trinket. Krola stepped forward. Zethar made a mistake. No, Sarah said. He made a statement that he owns everything, even you. Not anymore, Krola said, her voice ice. Then prove it, Sarah said, tossing a blade onto the table. Between them, Krola picked it up without hesitation, slicing a line across her palm. Blood welled, violet and shimmering. She handed the blade to Sarah. Now yours. Sarah mirrored the motion, her blood mixing with Krola's on the blade. I thought you were dead, she said. I wanted to believe you were. I was, Krola said. But someone pulled me out. She looked at Barry. Sarah's gaze followed, her voice losing its softness. Him, the mercenary with the bounty. He didn't save me, Krola said. He didn't have to. That's why I trust him. Sarah studied Barry, her eyes cold. You know she'll burn everything down, including herself. And I'll burn with her, Barry said, his voice steady. Sarah's lips twitched. Then let me show you what needs to burn. They descended into the lower vaults, where they found shipment manifests, trafficking records, and biotech implants, mapped to tracking chips embedded in children, sold for experimentation. Krola stared at the records, her hands trembling. This is what I built, she whispered. No, Barry said. This is what he twisted. Then I want it gone, Krola said, her voice hard. All of it? They planted charges in the vault, Sarah providing override codes to delay response teams. Krola moved through the station like a ghost, her steps silent, her eyes blazing with purpose. They reached the final terminal, and Krola placed her hand on the console. "He called me a burden," she said, her voice low. She hit the trigger. The blast roared through the station, shaking the walls. Barry and Krola sprinted for the dock, alarms screaming behind them. At the airlock, Sarah stopped short. "You're not coming?" Barry asked. "No," Sarah said. "If I go with you, I'm a traitor. If I stay, I'm a ghost. And right now, the ghosts have work to do." Krola and Sarah locked eyes. Then Sarah turned and vanished into the smoke. In the cockpit, Barry sat beside Krola, both still breathing hard from the run. "You all right?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I will be." He looked at her. "You kissed me before we jumped to Kalen, and you're just now bringing it up?" she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You said it wasn't about comfort," Barry said. "What is it about now?" "It's about control," Krola said, standing and walking to the back of the cockpit. "And if you follow me right now, Barry, you won't get it back tonight." He stood, smirking. "Good, because I don't want it back." Sether's new palace was a temple of steel, a monument to his ego. Barry and Krola planned a full-speed drop from orbit, aiming for the fortress's underbelly. The drop pod slammed into the sublevel, and they stepped out into chaos flames, licking the ceiling. Alarms screaming, guards scrambling, they fought their way to the vault, where Sether waited, flanked by his elite guard. "Welcome home, sister," he purred. Krola didn't answer. She raised her rifle and fired, dropping the nearest guard. The firefight was brutal, Barry and Krola moving in perfect sync. Sether laughed, even as they cut through his men. "You think you're taking this palace from me? You're just decorating it with your corpses. You built this on bones," Krola snarled. "Let's see how it holds up when it's your own." She lunged, blade high. Sether caught her wrist, slamming her against a pillar. Barry fired, but Sether rolled, kicking the blaster from his hand. The three collided in a chaos of fists and fury, until Krola plunged her blade into Sether's side. Barry fired point-blank into his chest, and the Empire's heart stopped. The palace burned as Barry and Krola staggered to the apex tower. The sky turned red, explosions roaring below. Krola kissed him, fierce and desperate, her body pressed against his. "You're mine now," she whispered, "no matter how this ends." They stayed on the roof until the screams died, the bond between them pulsing like a second heartbeat. But something was wrong. Krola clutched her ribs, her breath hitching. "I feel you," she gasped. "Too much." "Me too," Barry said, his own heart racing in time with hers. Hours later, in the medbay, the AI confirmed a pregnancy, a hybrid fetus, half human, half vellum. "We built something impossible," Krola whispered. "No," Barry said. "You." The directive ships came swiftly, their sensors locking onto the vagrant. Krola and Barry suited up, wiring her implants into the ship's targeting systems. They baited the ships into high orbit, overloading the fusion core to mask the ejection of a cloaked pod carrying their child. The vagrant exploded, the shockwave erasing the directive's forward line. Weeks later, the pod landed on a forested moon, the child a violet-skinned girl, crying softly. A hidden speaker crackled with Barry and Krola's voices. "You were made in fire, in war, in a love no law could understand. They failed because you survived." The child's eyes opened, and the galaxy changed.